Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Phil with Phil's Firewood and Land Management here, Phil's Firewood WI.com. As I'm sitting here today listening to the rain fall on the roof for another day and dealing with 2.5 inches of rain since about 10 o'clock Saturday morning, I got to thinking about how much the weather affects firewood production. Whether it be the rain days, the snow days, the cold, the heat, what have you, it all affects how many days a year we have to comfortably work outside making firewood. Here in northern Wisconsin, we deal with everything from 20 and 30 below air temps, 20 and 30 below wind chills, snow in the wintertime, hot and muggy in the summertime. Granted, not as hot as down south, but we still see our fair share of upper 80s, low 90s, heat indexes over 100, what have you. For some of the easiest ways to avoid or combat the weather, so to speak, it doesn't take the big fancy equipment with the enclosed cabs, heat, AC, what have you. Granted, that does make it pretty comfortable to work just about year round. Now, like I said, we've had 2.5 inches of rain here in the last basically 48 to 54 hours. So my skid steer with the full cab, heat, AC, the whole 9 yards, I go out in the yard today to try to work with that thing, and I'm going to spend 3 days fixing ruts because it's going to tear up the ground. Days like this, I've always got enough shop projects to pretty well keep me busy. I just got done sharpening a dozen processor chains. Stuff like that is great to do when the weather's bad. There's always maintenance stuff. Seems like there's never enough rain days to get caught up on maintenance, whether it be sharpening chains, truing up bars, cleaning up saws. I know a lot of guys, they give me a hard time that I spend way too much time cleaning and not enough time working, because for the most part, my saws, I try to make sure I keep them clean. Blow out the fins in the cylinder, clean air filters, keep the clutch covers clean, keep the clutches clean. That all helps keep that equipment last longer. Now, granted, not everybody's got a nice garage to work in on a rain day, or a pole shed to work in on a rain day, or what have you. And for some people, zoning becomes an issue as far as putting up one of these little tarp carport jobs or the little metal roof carport jobs, so a guy's got a spot to work out of the weather. One of the things I've seen, and I'm actually buying a new one myself, I see a lot of guys going with these little pop-up 10 by 10, 12 by 12. Back in the day, Easy Up was a big name brand canopies. They're fairly inexpensive. You can buy a pretty decent quality 10 by 10 for, a little over $100. And that's enough to get you out of the rain. You add a 10 by 12 tarp to two sides, well, now you're out of the wind and the rain. In the summertime in the heat, you got a shady spot to work. Easy to move around. You can pop them up in a matter of a few minutes, knock them down in a few minutes. So that's one of those options I think a lot of guys overlook. Everybody that I've talked to, oh, I got to get out of the weather, I got to buy something with a cab, or oh, I got to get out of the weather, I got to build a building. Well, putting up buildings aren't cheap anymore. I'm in a process right now of potentially building a shop, and I'm not going crazy. I'm not building some 80 by 200 shed, concrete, in-floor heat, air conditioned, the whole 9 yards. I'm looking at just a basic 24 by 40, 24 by 48, somewhere in that ballpark. So I've got decent working area to pull the truck in or pull the equipment in, what have you, and work on it. Because my trucks don't fit in my 3-stall garage. Too tall, too wide, what have you. They don't fit through the door. I can get the skid steer in the garage, but even then I'm pretty limited on what I can do. If I don't park it just right, I can't even flip the cab up on the skid steer because I hit the rafters. So these little pop-up canopies, I see a lot of guys, especially this time of year when it starts warming up, they've got the old patio umbrella bungee corded, ratchet strapped, whatever to the splitter. It works. Don't overthink it. Don't think you've got to go out and spend a bunch of money. Give yourself a shady spot to work in. I haven't really looked for them, but I've seen a few posts in some of the different trade groups. Guys are buying these little cordless electric misting fans to stay cool in the summertime. That all works. It all helps. And it's not big ticket items. If you're up north like me, wintertime, stuff gets cold, it gets uncomfortable. This last winter, I bought a cordless electric Milwaukee torpedo heater. M18 battery and a 25-pound propane tank. Now I've got heat. Is it the most efficient? God, no, because I'm still out in the wide open and I got that sucker just blasting on my legs, keeping my feet warm. But when you've got to be outside in the weather, you've got to look at some of that stuff. Plenty of companies make phenomenal rain gear for working out in the weather. Cold weather gear, there again, I'm in northern Wisconsin. We've got more money spent on cold weather gear than some people down south have spent on their whole wardrobe. But that's all part of it. It's all stuff that you need to look at. You need to be able to work comfortably out in the weather. There's all sorts of options as far as equipment with cabs. And I hear guys all the time, I don't want to spend the money on a cab. Well, okay, you don't want to spend the money on a cab. You're sitting on a machine, sitting in a machine, what have you. Those days where the weather really sucks, that cab is worth every penny of it. I know a few guys over the years, myself included, we've bought open station tractors because we're on and off of them all the time. Well, there have been an awful lot of times it's been darn tempting to go take the open station in, trade it in, drop the extra 30 or 40,000 to get a new one with a cab on it. And not saying I won't, but it's kind of hard to stomach that some days when I've got enough work inside of a building. If you are thinking about a building, I know a couple of guys that have bought these little skid sheds, portable buildings. Rain days, they're in there, they're bagging up firewood or they're hand splitting their mini split firewood for the tabletop stoves. Or that's their little small engine shop. They're doing their saw maintenance, what have you. There's other that's another option. I do know a few guys that have gotten in trouble over the last couple of years. Some of the zoning regulations are getting pretty tight, especially for guys running businesses out of their backyards. If you're a hobby woodcutter, you're not really making anything at it. You're doing it because you like cutting wood, what have you. It doesn't matter. Your zoning people are going to look at that as, okay, yep, he's selling a product, he's running a business. Whether you're making money or not, you're running a business. So they do crack down on some of that in certain areas. That's where, like I said, these little pop-up, easy-up canopies, they work phenomenal because they really can't say anything about it because every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you drive by a ball field of any sort, and you're going to see a few of them out there. Drive down to the park, there's going to be people with their pop-up canopies up just for a picnic. They're quick, they're easy, they're simple. Zoning don't say much about them. It's all ways to get out of the weather. Another thing, dry socks, dry boots, dry gloves. When you're out in the wet or out in the cold, your hands get wet, your hands get cold, your feet get wet or cold. You're not going to be moving that fast. In the summertime, I've got 4, 5, 6 pairs of gloves floating around just in my garage. Plus, normally I got a pair or two in each truck, pair or two in a skid steer. So I've got plenty of gloves to swap out. In the wintertime, I've got the wood stove. I've got a little drying rack I made up. Gloves get wet, stick them on the wood stove, dry them out. Grab a fresh pair. Socks and boots. Yeah, waterproof boots are uncomfortable in the summertime. I've never found a pair that was comfortable to wear when it was hot out. But keeping your feet dry is huge. Moisture wicking socks, there's all sorts of options out there for those to help keep your feet dry. In the wintertime, if you're working in the cold, layer your socks. Moisture wicking ones with some heavy wool socks on top of that make a huge difference. Make sure if you are layering, make sure your boots are enough bigger to, accommodate for that. The weather is, in my personal opinion, the weather is one of the biggest limiting factors on how much firewood you're going to be able to produce in a year. Yeah, equipment plays into it, but at the end of the day, you can get a lot done, even on the weekends, if you take weather out of the situation. We get stretches like we had here the last 6-8 weeks. We've been pretty fortunate. The weekends, for the most part, have not been complete washouts. But we've also had years where every weekend the month of May and every weekend the month of June it rained. Well, if you're trying to do this just on the weekends or evenings, what have you, if you have rain Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday, well, there you lost a whole week's worth of production. If you can get out of the weather, keep working, stay productive, it's going to be huge at the end of the year. If you really, really crunch the numbers, and I've always been a numbers guy, I know a lot of guys, I can't do 100 cord a year as a side thing. Well, 100 cord a year is only a cord every Saturday and a cord every Sunday with 2 weekends off every year. Doing a cord a day, if you keep at it and are able to keep at it, that's not hard to do with, a small pro saw or a big homeowner saw and a box store splitter. You start sneaking in or start getting to the point where you're doing 2 cord every Saturday, 2 cord every Sunday. Now you're talking 200 cord a year. When you really start looking at it that way, it's not hard to do the volume. But you've got to take weather out of the equation one way or another. Some of the other things, pickaroons, hookaroons, pulp tongs, when you're dealing with wood that's been rained on for a week, try not to touch it with your gloves. Keeps your gloves drier. As far as keeping your equipment out of the weather, there again, them little pop-up canopies, little tarp carports, what have you, will help keep it out of the weather. But at the end of the day, a lot of this equipment, the weather isn't going to really affect the equipment. Your pro model chainsaws, your loggers are out there no matter what the weather is. So those saws will handle working out in the weather just fine. Your log splitters, about the only thing on a log splitter that's going to care about the weather is the hoses will eventually deteriorate just from the sun beating on them. But the iron, it don't care if it's getting rained on, getting snowed on. Your hydraulic stuff, if it's really cold in the wintertime and you've got to be out there splitting, the little magnetic block heaters or little stick-on silicone block heaters keep that oil tank, at least in that 30 to 40 degree bracket before you try firing the stuff up, really helps. Get to know what oils they recommend for what temperatures. Now, I'm not saying you've got to change your oil in your log splitter every spring and every fall. So you got summer weight in it in the summer, winter weight in the winter, what have you. But find an oil that is going to work for your climate. Obviously up here, up north, we don't run a whole lot of AW46. That oil's about like molasses when it's below zero. We run a lot of AW32, ISO 32, 10 weight. All 3 of those are basically the same weight oil. A lot of guys run ATF up here if they're not using it much in the summertime. So there's all sorts of ways to work around the weather. The biggest thing is you kind of got to look at, okay, what can I do? How can I still be productive? There's a lot of days I'd love to sit and just drink coffee all day, sitting on a couch watching something on TV. But at the end of the day, then I didn't accomplish anything. I'm no further ahead than I was the day before. Like I said, I just got done sharpening processor chains. Next step, I'm going to be grabbing saws off the rack behind me here, firing stuff up, double checking, make sure bars are still in good shape. I got a mountain of saw chains that's been hanging over there on a shelf for a while. I should probably go through all them. That's all rain day stuff. And if I get all that done, or they're talking more rain tomorrow, I've got wood set in here. I've got my Wolf Ridge bagging station in here. I've got a pallet set in here. So I'll be bagging up campfire wood while it's raining. If we do get a dry stretch where I can actually go out and do something with some of the equipment, I got plenty of that to do too. So it's all about figuring out a way to still be productive no matter what the weather throws at you. I think one of the next topics I'm hoping to touch on is I've had a bunch of guys asking for recommendations on little tools, stuff under $500, that'd help make a big difference in their operation. I think that's probably going to be one of my next videos. Again, if you got questions, looking for advice, what have you, go ahead, reach out, comment on this, find me on Facebook. I'm not hard to find on Facebook. If you've got other suggestions how to work around the weather, toss them out there. Over the years I've learned there's a lot of guys that overthink things. So some of the simplest suggestions, they might have overlooked it. I know there's stuff I've overlooked over the years, some little trick, suggestion, hack, whatever you want to call it, some little thing. I'm also going to be at Midwest Firewood Frenzy down in Eau Claire on Saturday the 22nd. Hopefully be able to grab some videos down there. I'm going to take a couple of my Huskies down because they got a Stihl guy showing up with all the shiny, fancy new stuff from Stihl. So I got to take a couple of my Huskies down and, ruffle some feathers and whatnot. So hopefully we'll have some videos from that. And if you've got, topics you want me to touch on, throw them out there. I'll give you my 2 cents worth, and if you're lucky, you might get a whole nickel out of me. So until next time, keep cutting.